One sits at the top of the table, the other in 10th, but only 5 points of difference between Liverpool and Man City. As we're joined by Dan Riccio and Alex Seixeiro. Alex, is this a game that, well, not only a premier matchup, but a bit deceiving, or is it potentially in favor, lopsided-wise, for Liverpool?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'm hoping for a closely contested game, and I do think that's what we're going to get. I think a part of that is Liverpool's, defensive issues, and they've, given up the second most goals in the Premier League. So I think there's a chance for Pep Guardiola to exploit Liverpool's biggest problem right now. But I think on one side, you have Liverpool, who has a player in Diogo Jota who just can't stop scoring right now. And, the big conversation is, what does Jurgen Klopp do? Does he stick with Bobby Firmino, who has been a fixture in that front three for the last couple of years? Or do you have someone in Jota who is scoring about every 71 minutes that he's on the pitch? And do you slot him in right away? I think you can make the case that keeping Firmino in there to start the game makes a little more sense because you're dealing with Kevin De Bruyne, maybe Bernardo Silva starts, Riyad Mahrez. It's a really dynamic midfield that Manchester City poses, so you might need that defensive ability that Firmino brings. But Jota's going to play in this game, and depending on the circumstances, whether it's once the second half starts or once the 60th minute hits, he's going to play. He has been outstanding, and in the Champions League game against Atalanta earlier this week, he scored a hat trick. He is linking up with Mane and Salah extremely well. So 5-point gap between the two, and City has a big chance here to cut into Liverpool's lead.
Yeah, and you think for City, you can't really afford to lose this one too much. I mean, I know it's very early days still into the season, but an 8-point gap as Liverpool, as Alex had just mentioned, is really starting to hit their stride and finding their offense again. That could be a really hard gap to kind of close even over the course of the rest of this season. Manchester City just hasn't looked great. They haven't found that form. Of course, a little bit better in Champions League this week, but I still think that they're trying to integrate some of their new pieces. Ferran Torres is starting to find his feet a little bit more, but they just haven't looked the dominant side that you expect Manchester City to be. Liverpool right now seems to be the team more on form.
Well, we saw Man U with Champions League loss to Istanbul this past week, and we've discussed goalkeeping, we've discussed their defensive play. Maybe we move to Bruno Fernandes, and the numbers aren't too bad for him, Dan, but are you expecting more from this Portuguese star?
Well, I think there has to be more, and this is kind of the problem with building your team around a number 10 like Bruno Fernandes, who's a fantastic player, but in the return to play last year, he was fantastic throughout, and Manchester United's results showed that as well. But when he is not on his game, when he is not playing at the highest level, you start to see where the cracks are in Manchester United. They try to filter everything through him, and Arsenal did a fantastic job of limiting him, limiting his space, and making sure they shut him down, and Manchester United had no answers beyond that. They've got a ton of talent on that team, but Ole Gunnar Solskjaer chooses, it seems, to filter everything through Fernandes, and that puts a lot of pressure on the Portuguese midfielder.
Yeah, and for Ole, it really seems like time is running out for him. They were terrible against Başakşehir earlier this week. The first goal they gave up to Demba Ba, they were a defensive mess. And the whispers with Pochettino, look, they're getting louder. He was on Sky Sports last week suggesting he's ready to manage. There's some suggestion this week that United have begun maybe approaching his representatives to see if he's interested in taking over. And I think the big issue that United have is, can they convince Pochettino that United should be his next spot? We know their defensive frailties. What to do with Paul Pogba has been a disaster for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who has not been able to figure out how to use Pogba in the best way. And then there's the issue of Ed Woodward, and that is a whole other can of worms. So if United can convince Pochettino this is the right spot, I'll tip my cap to them. But between PSG, maybe Barcelona, City, I don't know if City's going to have an opening next summer, but I think watching Pep, maybe if he goes back to Spain, I think that's something to watch. So I don't think Pochettino should be in a rush now unless he really believes that he can take United to where they should be. And we'll see if United can convince Pochettino that going to Old Trafford is the right move for him.
Well, they've had 22 managers in their history. It sounds like they may have a 23rd soon. Dan, you want to finish up with something on the Spurs?
Well, they were second in the table after their win last week, but of course, Leicester, with their win over Leeds, took that spot. It's really interesting with Tottenham. I really liked what Jose Mourinho has done. I took a little bit of heat for calling them in the top 4 at the start of the year, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. Gareth Bale scored his first goal last weekend, and you see the way Harry Kane and Heung-min Son are playing right now. The Spurs in that offense have really been a delight to watch. And also, as you watch Manchester United and Chelsea and other teams have their defensive issues, even Liverpool, well, Jose Mourinho has done a very good job of making Tottenham a little bit more solid at the back as well. So I'm not saying they're a title challenger just yet, but they're really firmly into the top 4 conversation for me.
Guys, appreciate the insight and enjoy the weekend.